All right, so what are other people saying about landfalls this year? So here is Joe Bastardi, Weather Bell. Well, it's actually Weather Bell, not just Joe Bastardi, but here is what they're proclaiming could happen this hurricane season. The red areas, 6 times the normal activity, yellow, 3 times the normal activity, and green would be below normal activity, which would include some of the areas that were pounded last year. Iota and Eta uh, impacted Central America badly last year. They're predicting that's not going to be the case this year. Below normal chances down there. Average for, well, actually 3 times the normal for the Lesser Antilles over here and the Yucatan Peninsula, Western Cuba, and the southern half of the Florida Peninsula. The very northeastern Gulf of Mexico, which is rather interesting because I'm going to show you my predictions coming up here, but they're not quite touching on some of the areas that I have it impacted this high impact potential this year. They're also predicting Georgia and southern South Carolina, which also I have at high impact this year. I also have high impact up in the red zone that he has for the mid-Atlantic. And he has 3 times the normal from there up to include the Northeast and the Canadian Maritimes. They don't mention Bermuda up here. I don't know why, or Mexico. I guess if he doesn't have anything highlighted, I guess it's just normal activity. So they're predicting 3 to 6 hurricanes, major impact landfalls 2 to 4, which would be alarming if that happened, and hurricane conditions 4 to 8 U.S. impacts. So according to Weather Bell, this could be a blockbuster season just like last year. I mean, that would indicate anywhere between 4 and 8 landfalls of hurricanes this year. So I don't know. But the only thing different from my predictions this year is the red highlighted area he has here in the western Gulf of Mexico. I'm not real high on that area this year. And it's not to say that nothing's going to come up in there, but that red area over here, I don't really have it at high risk this hurricane season. So that's Weather Bell. All right, so let's get to the next one. And this is Dale Link. Now, he doesn't really get a lot of attention on social media. He's been doing this for quite a few years, but not as long as I've been doing them. I've been doing this since 2003. But what he does is he picks zones, right? So he does this not only for the Atlantic, but the Western Pacific and the Indian Ocean and all over the globe. I'm strictly an Atlantic hurricane guy, but he's got the Western Gulf, Zone 1, Zone 2, southeastern Louisiana over to Alabama. Neither of these zones I have at high risk. What is interesting is he has Zone 3 at high risk, which does include my high risk area. And Zone number 4 also includes my high risk area, which is the southern half of Florida. And Zone 5, Puerto Rico out in the Virgin Islands. I'll comment on that in a minute. And also Zone 4B. I guess he has 2 different Zone 4s, but yeah, the Zone 4. I don't know why he just doesn't pick like Zone 6 or something, but he's got 4B up here, eastern North Carolina, which I also have at high risk this hurricane season. So he's got a few areas. 3 of his 6 are not in my high impact zone this year. So Dale Link, again, 3 out of the 6 I have at high risk. He has at high risk, or at least he's got the zones thinking that. And by the way, these are hurricane landfalls, not named storms. Mine include named storms and hurricanes. All right, now here's Rob at Crown Weather, and he's got the same area. Maybe he extended it over. And again, this is, he's giving himself a lot of room here from, say, Morgan City to the west, all of Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, all of the Bahamas, coastal Cuba, although he doesn't really have it as a hit on Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the northeastern Virgin Islands and Leeward Islands up in here. That's kind of a big, wide swath. He's got lower than average, which is similar to what uh, Weatherbell was saying. Lower than average impact down here in the Southwest Caribbean. However, I'm very concerned about Jamaica this year and the Caymans. He has lower than average risk down here. So I diverge on that. And he also has the Canadian Maritimes at high risk this year. I'm kind of neutral on that. But Rob does a great job because he sends out a mailing list. If you subscribe to his service, he gives you a sometimes like almost every day, every other day, maybe once a week if things are slow. But he gives updates constantly through email, kind of giving his reasoning on models and everything. And it's very inexpensive. So I suggest check out Rob's subscription service over there at Crown Weather. I've subscribed to it, and it's a great source of information. And he gets really into the details when there's a landfalling threat. So I appreciate that. But we diverge a little bit on the methodology. Again, I like to get down to city level so that there's no gray area with my predictions. If I say your area is going to get hit, you're going to get hit. There's not going to, or you're going to get at least 40-mile-an-hour winds. There's no, well, past 60 miles away, so it didn't count. If the wind field, I'm expecting the tropical storm force wind field to impact my cities. So this is from Ben Knoll, and this kind of stood out to me. Now, this is precipitation percentiles to identify potential hurricane hotspots, right? So naturally, the darker the colors, the more potential impacts going into the hurricane season. Mark from hurricanetrack.com mentioned this on Twitter, and I decided to take a screenshot of it because he's got a lot of the same areas that I have in high impact this year. The Florida Peninsula, all the way up to the Big Bend, including the Carolinas. So, and he also has the Western Caribbean shaded here a little bit. Not particularly Puerto Rico, maybe a little bit, 50%. Southeastern Bahamas. I do not have the southern Gulf of Mexico highlighted. He does here, and the Southern Caribbean Sea for potential high impacts. And of course, up in the Canadian Maritimes, I'm kind of neutral on that this year. And he doesn't have Bermuda. Strangely, I don't have Bermuda either this year. And Bermuda is such a high hit area that it almost gets hit almost every single year, just like the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And for me not to have Bermuda in my top 20 is really alarming. Okay, so here's Phil Klotzbach. I'll get to my predictions in just a minute. So Phil Klotzbach doesn't really he gives very small percentages for counties all through the United States that he thinks are going to be impacted in the upcoming hurricane season. But what he's also done is this, which is not just by him, but Michael Bell and Jordan Jones. So what I did was I highlighted all the states that he's showing the potential for impact versus climatology. So over here on the right, this is the climatological averages of potential impacts from named storms. And over here on the left is his thinking of the probabilities of getting a named storm. So out of all of these states, he has the biggest spread are for Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, and Virginia, which I find interesting because all of the other areas that he has are only slightly above the climatological normal or right at it. So I decided to highlight these 6 states of Phil Klotzbach thinking there's above average, above average more than normal on his way of thinking, these states being impacted. Out of these states, only North Carolina do we have an agreement on, and South Carolina to a certain extent. Florida, he does not have any more than, he only has it at 10% above the climatological average. compared to Alabama at 17%. And I just don't have Alabama at high risk this year. And Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, he's got those all at higher risk than his climatological averages, way above, 17% above, and the others at lower chances. So with that said, though, Phil Klotzbach has also said that the impacts from climate change, global warming, is a concern, which diverges from Dr. William Gray. Now, I've attended a lot of these hurricane conferences, and I've had conversations with these guys about climate change. And I have an interesting soundbite I want to share with you here. And it is from 2007. I sat down with Phil Klotzbach, did an interview, and this is a clip from that interview. And listen to this carefully, because it implies that if we don't have a change in the warming of the Atlantic Basin and the amount of increased activity, then we need to reevaluate what's going on in the Atlantic Basin. So here's what Phil said back in 2007. Listen carefully.
Well, now, Dr. Gray, I know you don't speak for Dr. Gray correct, with everything he says, but he does say 5 to 10 years he expects things to cool again. Do you believe that? I mean, do you really buy it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, time will tell. Certainly, if we don't see cooling in the next 5 to 10 years, then that's probably our theory isn't valid. I think that's a pretty fair statement, is that we should start to see a leveling off of the warming and a slight cooling over the next 5 to 10 years. If that doesn't occur, then there may be something else going on.
Wow. I mean, that's 2007. That's 13 years ago. 14 years. I mean, it's going on 14 years. So we were already active way before that interview took place. And Dr. William Gray believes in the multi-decadal oscillation, which indicates that every 30 years or so, we go back into this cool period where we see less activity in the Atlantic Basin. Well, Phil Klotzbach completely contradicted that in that statement. And if we continue being busy as we've been, with maybe a couple of little dips, a couple of years have been kind of slow over the last 30 years, but we're breaking records. We're having these tremendous amount of. In fact, after 2005, I've said to a lot of people, I go, this might be the beginning of something that's really crazy. And will it continue to increase? And last year we saw 30 named storm. Man, that's ridiculous. Now, you could argue, well, they're naming a lot of these subtropical systems. They're naming a lot of systems in the North Atlantic. Is that because of satellite and data availability, or is that because more storms are developing further north, which is another interesting concept, because in my database, there has been an increase in the amount of landfalling systems north of 30 degrees. So that factors in, but something is going on. I mean,